Hello, Parsons, Collab Design for Literacy Students. This is Marcos, and this is our week 6 to 7 recap briefing video. It's March 1st, so we're marching into spring, and winter is behind the rear view mirror right now. It's still a little bit cold, but we're starting to head towards a new part of the season. And with that new part of the season comes a new project and the completion of our first project. So I want to make sure there's clarity for everybody and that you know what you need to be doing because we've got two things going on at once. So I just want to recap what we went over in class. It was a little bit long in class. It's probably gonna be a little bit long right now, but please stay with me through the end so that you're fully briefed on what you should be having done by this week. So as we look at the schedule, we're now ending with part 6 of our baby board book. And that means that the final files will be due and you'll need to submit those onto the Google Drive as soon as you can this week. Sooner the better, but you got till Thursday technically. But if you could do them sooner so I can start working on them as I have to open each one of them and process them and get them ready and make official PDFs of them to be printed. And then at the same time, you'll be starting you're not your baby board book, your storybook project. And let me just fix that in the schedule here. So we'll be starting the storybook project. The children's storybook is the official name. And that's going to mean that you're going to be needing to create a research concept deck. For Thursday for class, we're going to have a review session with everyone presenting their research and concept on their story. But what you need to do, the very, very first step, is you need to pick or decide on the kind of story you're going to work on. Now, earlier this morning, on Saturday morning, I sent off an email or I shared a Google Docs that had a long list of various children's storybooks, myths, and folklore from various cultures. And the list is there for you to look at and use and potentially pick from. Most probably pick from that one, but you also have the option of finding your own story if you have one you know about from your own culture or from anywhere, or if you have one that you were told in your family and it's a unique story. But if you're going to pick your own story, remember it has to be in the public domain. That means it can't be copyright written from somebody. It can't be some YouTuber story. It has to be from the past, old enough that it's not owned by anybody so that we can use it. But with the list I sent, it's a matter of picking from that list and reading through some of the stories, and you can choose to do a couple of things with that. Now, you can hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's put pause on that. Let's get back to the baby board books, and we'll talk about how to handle the storybooks after I talk about baby board books. So baby board books, we're going to apply the last edits that anything we talked about on Thursday in our review session, finalize it, make the last tweaks, make that last addition. Some of you have some work to do still. You're not quite finished, so get that done. And those of you not finished yet, please share with me so you can be sure that everything's looking good. But once all that's done, just take one last look at everything, review your text one more time, read it out loud with your own dad voice or mom voice. And then you need to get it ready for production. So make sure you expand the images so they fit into the bleeds. Make sure that all the images, all the links, the JPEGs, the PNGs, the images you put into your InDesign file, that they're all connected and they're all nice and high res. They're not looking low res because we're gonna print this now. And make sure that you're able to then package your InDesign file. And when you package the InDesign file, it'll gather everything up. It'll gather up all your image links. It'll gather up the fonts used. Hopefully you're using a font from Adobe, or and if not, make sure the font gets connected and gets sent to me so that I can open it on my end and I can make a PDF that by having your InDesign file with all the links and fonts organized, and that's why you need to package it. So when you package it, or before you package it, remember the bleed. You have the red line out here, and the white is the actual shape of the book or the actual live area of the book, and the red line outside of it shows how you have to have extra. And that you can see this here in the bottom left corner, how it needs to be expanded so that there's more than what you see. And as we talked in class, some of you have to do some adjusting, but most of you seem to have gotten planned for this already, so great. So once you're ready to go to the top of InDesign, under File, scroll down to near the bottom, hit Package. You get a menu bar. Make sure everything's clear there, and then hit Package again on the bottom right corner, and that'll bring everything together into a folder that has an InDesign, an IDML InDesign file. It has your links, it has your fonts, and then use that to upload in a folder in the Project 6 final files with your name on the folder, and then you'll be done with this project for now. There's more details of what I just told you here. Also, there's a PDF on how to package and design in case you're having trouble with that. And on the Google Drive here's the Project 6 final files, Part 6 final files. And then also there's Part 1 of Children's Storybook. So let's talk about Children's Storybook. Really quick to recap what I talked about in class. We want to make sure that we have a good understanding. You guys are dirt designers, and part of what you need to be doing as dirt designers or as any kind of designer is you need to be able to understand who is it that you're working for, what their message is, what their objectives are, like what kind of look and feel have they done in the past. How can you fit in with your contribution to dirt by creating a unique book that's uniquely yours and your style and your point of view, but also fits into the brand of dirt and has the look and feel of what dirt has to offer. And part of it has to do with like what's the objective of the book. And as you know, part of learning as a child and having books has to do with academic learning and learning how to read out loud, read sentences, comprehend, how to write them. Those things are important, but we want to go beyond that with dirt books. We want to make sure that we still stay in line with the idea of the importance of the interaction between the grown-up, the loving parent, the loving father, mother, grandparent, brother, sister, the babysitter, the friend, the older brother, the older sister, the interaction between two or three people reading together, reading out loud, looking together, interacting. And that loving experience also has to coincide with the idea of having time to help teach a child about the world, about the realities of the world, and how they can best navigate through that world. And I'll skip this quote we talked about it, but basically the importance of stories as being the kind of thing that can teach you so many things that you can't really get out of other mediums. So part of that has to do with like understanding the human experience, understanding human nature, that we come from a broken, fallen world, that each of us are great and beautiful in our own way, but all of us have challenges that we have to live up to, our flaws and our faults, and that oftentimes we don't live up to the best things we want. We make mistakes. And we overcome those mistakes, and understanding that and giving those experiences examples of people in life who've gone through and had challenges thrust upon them or have had made mistakes and fallen into problems, but then overcome them through various ways. And what we want to do is we want to be able to have these stories connect in a way that recognizes that in our Western culture, through the ways our pop culture or our culture in general, through art, through science, through history, how we've evolved is that we've all realized that we have the importance of each individual as an interhuman life that's valuable, and that we're made in the image of God, and that we're all people that have a voice and have something to say and have human rights and deserve to be treated in a fair, equitable way. And so understanding that in terms of like teaching those kind of moral values in stories that we tell that showcase to children like what it is, what the responsibility is of being a citizen or of being a good human. And then we want to also come from the point of view of seeing life as it is and not as we wish it was. Like we wish everything was perfect. We wish things could progress to the point where they're beautiful and running smoothly. But we know that the reality is that it's not that way. And we want to recognize that and be able to provide stories that showcase that becomes a challenge for each of us in our lives, and that we might face unexpected tragedy or opportunities that we want to be able to get the best out of. So having that perspective, and most importantly, also just providing a belief in a greater good. And if we don't have this belief that there's something beyond us, then we basically have meaningless lives. And what's the point of being good if there's nothing to be accountable to? And that translates basically in a easier way to understand that love is important, and to live a loving life and a caring life and empathy to others and treating people the way you want to be treated. And also the idea of service and sacrifice lead to happiness. These kinds of values are what Dirt is trying to instill in the stories we tell. So with that perspective in mind, look at how you're going to take on your version of a storybook. Here are the storybooks that we talked about in class. These are 8 by 10 books. You have a little more options on the amount of pages, but they need to be at least 20 to 36 pages, somewhere in that range. And that they're going to be full color. But again, it's like the board books. We can't do special treatments. We can't die cut or make gold leaf or make the letters stick up or anything like that. It's just a matter of using four color process to tell the story using type, illustration, and um, and the traditional process of a good old-fashioned children's book. Um, Now, when it comes to the stories, I sent everybody stories, like I said earlier, via email, a Google Docs, and each of you are now looking at a list of stories from different cultures. Some might be from your own culture, some might be from different cultures. And now it's a matter of like you trying to decide how you want to approach your book, what kind of story you want to take on, and how you want to adapt that approach or put that approach into play. And there's a few options of how you can do that. The one way that's easiest to understand, number one, is basically taking the traditional text of a story, maybe the way you found it on the link that I sent you, and deciding to stay as true to that as you can, maybe editing a little bit, make it shorter or make it a little less Old English or whatever. But basically trying to keep it a classic story and then utilize your own illustration process to maybe modernize that or stay with the classic look, but still just because you're going to make it in the 21st century, it's going to look new and fresh. So that's sort of the first option. Then as we kind of evolve that option, you could choose to maybe upgrade the text even more, shorten it even more, make it sound, make the dialogue more 21st century. I mean, don't say bro or Riz or whatever, but make it or maybe you do, I don't know. But make it sound like it's coming from people of today so that it's relatable. Because the key to these stories is even though a story could be hundreds of years old, centuries old, human nature hasn't changed. The issues that we're dealing with back then are the same things we're dealing with today. There's nothing new under the sun. And we have the same challenges as we had back then. I know things have changed and it's not the same from before, but the underlying issues, the underlying problems, the underlying opportunities, and the beauty of life is still the same. And I want you to pull that out of your story and find a way to upgrade that if you're going to modernize it, like number two says, and also maybe do that with the characters, make them living today instead of being people from the past or from a different culture. And another way is to revise your story, write your story with traditional story at the basis of your new story. So basically what you can do is you can change part of the characters, change who is it that is the hero in the traditional story, maybe make it a different kind of person, change the gender, change the age, or change the culture, but keep the same premise of the story, just evolve it into being a different version of that story. But the same outcome, the same moral, the same goals that are in the story are shown in your story. Or you can use a story like that to then help inspire you to think of a new original story that is basically taking that same framework and further evolving it to being a story that's new and different, but adapted from or inspired by a traditional old story that now is a new story that you created, kind of using the same premises. Because again, the challenges, issues, being a hero, like that stuff is universal. It's been true through the ages. And so those are, and then the other thing is you might want to take a story that you know of it from that is not on the list and that you want to utilize. And so if you want to do that, great, but let me know what that is. Um, or the very last option is just you have a story in mind, you want to write it. It's a children's story, but it's in line with the kind of stories that we're talking about for Dirt. That's the last option to create your own story. Okay, so I went over some of these in class, but Tortoise and the Hare is basically a good way of looking at a classic story that everyone should know about, like the kind of like race between two animals that are at odds, and for sure the hare is much faster than the tortoise, yet the tortoise wins because of his discipline and his slow and steady wins the race is the moral. Another book we didn't look at is this, and this is just a good version of like finding a traditional story that is not known, at least from my perspective. And this is a Japanese story, Momotaro, that is your classic hero story. So it shares a lot of the premises or plots or character development that all hero stories share, but it's just a different version of it from a different culture in Japan. And taking it and kind of keeping that story in its traditional realm, but updating the text and making it just flow better and sound right, and obviously translating it if it's from a different country, if it's from Japan, and then utilizing her own personal illustration style in a narrative way. And basically, I'll just run through this really quick, but doing beautiful kind of like watercolor sketchy illustrations and sticking to like good, clean, basic type. And the story is, of course, there's a couple in love, a little too old for kids, never had kids, and sure wish they had kids. And one day they're harvesting these giant peaches, and boom, out comes Momotora, and this is their new kid, and they raise them with the right values, working hard and teaching them the ways of being a good citizen, a good human being. And then eventually, like all heroes, you have to leave home and go off on your hero's journey. And this happens, and he then Momotaro finds friends along the path and begins to bring together his own little community of friends, kind of like Wizard of Oz. Like I said, stories are the same, they're just different, packaged differently. So they march towards their goal, and of course, they overcome an obstacle at Ogre Island, and they need to overcome this obstacle. And there they find ogres partying with all the treasures and the money of the community that they've taken, that they shouldn't have taken, and they're plotting a surprise attack. And of course, like they're going to attack. And I'm not here to promote violence, but I think that like standing up for yourself and being strong and confronting bullies and all those things are important to do. And a well-planned, executed, collaborative attack is a great thing to show and to have kind of this comic book influence, still keeping it in a classic way, but showing that you have to like confront people and you have to like take risks, and you can overcome your enemies through like wit and power and like trust in a higher power, and to prevail and to be the heroes and get the treasures and the spoils and the honor from his family. So that's an example of like a kind of a nice way of showcasing an unknown story from a different culture. So if you know stories, don't rely necessarily on my list, only because I don't necessarily have the, I only spend a limited amount of time trying to find the right stories for you. Another example, this is one that didn't work at class, but I can make it work here now that I fixed it. But this is The King and the Seed, and I talked about it in class, but basically there's this contest, and this is done kind of taking the kingdom and making it illustrated in this kind nice child-friendly kind of way, that's kind of idealistic. And the king is the kingdom is full of animals. There's no humans. They just have human qualities. And of course, the king is the lion. They have this contest, and everyone who's invited to compete gets seeds, and they all have to grow the finest flowers. And everyone's in order to become the next king, and everyone's needing to do this. And so the rabbit is one of the animals who was asked to compete in this competition, and it shows the seasons of him cultivating his uh his seeds, but they never produce anything, to his dismay. And even after working hard and doing it right and being diligent and disciplined, yet the day comes of the contest, and it's been a year, and all the other participants are marching in with their beautiful results, and the rabbit's confused and doesn't know what to do except for to show up as promised and report honestly what had happened. And the king was kind of a little bit sneaky, and he had basically sent everyone duds, like seeds that aren't going to plant anything. And so basically, he knew that everyone presented their flowers were cheating and used different seeds, and that the bunny was the only honest one. And because of that, the bunny became the next king and was given the throne. And yeah, so it's kind of a good story about honesty, and but shown in like a friendly, kid-friendly way. Not as, there's no attack, so it's the different age levels you can be targeting here. This is a little bit younger than the book before. Okay, and then just a few more I'll show you. This one also didn't open up in class, but this is again taking a the well-known biblical narrative of Adam and Eve and the origins of how man came to be and how man was given freedom of choice and the freedom to choose whether to follow the rules, to obey God, or to not do that. And as we all know, Adam and Eve, or these characters, I don't think we call them Adam and Eve. We sort of take the story and make it, well, she does call it the Garden of Eden, and she has this cool kind of paper cutout style. And yes, they're Adam and Eve. And kind of explains how they were brought into the world, and the world was beautiful, and the world was good, and everything was nice and simple. But because we live in a world that we have freedom and we have the ability to choose, God gave them awareness that there's a tree of knowledge of good and evil, but they weren't to eat from it or touch it or just to stay away from it. And of course, they did that successfully, but then eventually they were tempted by the serpent, and the serpent convinced them that this was totally fine to eat. And what secrets does God have that you shouldn't know about? You should eat this. You're not going to die. Look at me. I'm eating it. I'm not dead. And so, as we all know, they both gave in. And so there's consequences to this that they chose to separate themselves from God. And because of that, they ended up having to live life outside of the garden, outside of like everything being perfect and provided. Instead, they had to work the land and produce children and build their communities and take us to the point where we are today. And still thrive and still be in relation with God, but to have it be kind of a different life than what was first planned for and what had first started, all because we chose to do things our way. And yeah, so that's like a good important story to know about, whether you're a Christian or not. I think it's a good story to know about in terms of how people see the origins of how we came to be and how we came to have the way that we live our lives today. And the snake in the back is kind of alluring. So that's always remember the back is a good opportunity. Okay, so maybe another couple more here. Day of Adventure. This is the example. I'll just remind you that this is where you take this student took the story of Stone Soup, which is a Japanese folk tale about I mean, not Stone Soup, it's the Stone Cutter. And this is a story of a person who, from the ancient Japan, who was a stone cutter. It was kind of a boring life, and he didn't appreciate his boring life, and he envied the birds, and the birds get to fly, and he wanted to be a bird, and he imagined himself to be a bird, and then he got bored again being the bird, and he wanted to be the clouds, and then so he became the clouds, and then he wanted to be the mountains, and he became the mountains, and he wanted to be the sky, and he was always never satisfied. So this student took the premise of that story, took the ideas of that story and the moral of the story, and turned it into a new story. And I think this is like a good sweet spot if you want to do your own story, like base it on a real story from the past, and then just adapt it to your own. So for her, she created a character, a little girl who lives in Tokyo, and she's an adventurous girl, scraped up knees and ready for action, and just like a great kid, and off and running in the community. But it was like, she wanted more out of life, and she wished she could be run as fast as a dog. And so the little wizardy character here turned her into a dog, and then uh, wishes she could become a cat and turns into a cat, and then lives the cat life to its fullest, and then wants to be a bird and flies off into the sky, and then wants to actually be the sky, and continues on and just kind of coveting other things, and then finally realizes she misses her home, she misses mom, she's getting hungry, it's time for dinner, she hears mom calling, and she transforms herself back into the little girl and becomes a happy daughter and part of the family, and learns her lesson about appreciating who you are while still having an adventurous day, and thus the day of adventure. So that's a great way to kind of like make a brand new story, but built on the foundation of a classic folklore from the past. Okay, and then oops, I don't want to go there. Um, and then here's another one. This is the Sun and the Moon. I think it's a Korean folk tale. It's adapted. It's here. It says adapted and illustrated by Wen JG. So adapted meaning it's the story of the sun and the moon. Whoops. But it's been slightly changed. It's been slightly updated. It's a little bit different. But it's still enough of the story that still be called the sun and the moon. So basically she took the story um, and the sun and the moon are like, I think they're brothers and sisters, and they get into a fight, and they never and because of that they can never see each other. That's why the sun and the moon don't appear at the same time. Well, I mean, sometimes they do, but they don't. So this is the story. She makes them human, and they are living their good life, and then they get into a fight, and just like Adam and Eve, bad things happen. There's a little bit of pushing match here, and then they have to suffer the consequences of their choice. And one becomes the sun, one becomes the moon, and they can never see each other. The sun comes out during the day, the moon comes out during the night, and they're separated because of the choice they made. And that's why the sun and the moon are in the sky separately. So that's kind of a nice way to tell a story about how things are and how they relate to the way we behave as humans. Okay, and I think there's maybe one more here. This last one here is another example of how to, oh my goodness, how to take a story that is not found anywhere except from the experiences you have at home. And this is a story, I think, unless Anti-Tigress is a legend, it might be, but this is basically a story that this student had experienced. She's Australian, she's Asian and Australian, but experienced at home. And she utilized that experience of being told the story at home and literally signed up her brother and sister and mom and dad to be characters in her story. She made a trip home because she was already planning to go home and took photographs. Or no, she asked them to take photographs from Australia and send them to her. It was incredible. She directed them like through a Zoom or whatever, and created a story of an ant who turns into a tiger or a tigress, comes to visit. Oh, the parents leave and leave them at home alone, a classic setup for a kid story, and they're having fun, and all of a sudden somebody's at the door and they see it's Auntie Tigress, but something's not right. She seems suspicious. Should they let her in? They let her in, and then she cuts off the brother's finger. Oh, I think this is a little gruesome, but that's part of the story. And she uses this great kind of photo collage illustration combination to tell the story, utilizing herself and her brother and sister and mom and dad in the story. And everything turns, they trick the tiger, and I forgot how, but everyone lives happily ever after. And there they are. It's so amazingly cute. The actual family of the student and the student in this story. I love it. And also this incredible illustration style that she has here, look, with the tiger and everything else that she drew. So that's another way, like bring in your family, or bring in the stories of your family or traditions of your family, or just the vibe of your family, and make them part of your book. And this is just totally fantastic. And even the great ending at the back. Right? Like, come on, that is awesome. Okay, guys, so that is those are the examples I want you to be inspired by. Take the list. We went through these in class, and I have some of these, not all of them, but some of them are on the Blurb Dirt bookstore. So I'll send that link with the assignment and with the email. And so check those out if you need individually. And so this first step is a concept deck. We're doing the same thing that we did for our first assignment for the baby board book. We're going to do some research. We're going to do some inspiration mood boards, and we're going to try to come up with an idea of how we're going to take on our book design and an illustration style. But we don't have to do any of the design. We just want to get the inspiration and the words for it. So basically what you want to do is create a deck, the same deck you've been using already. You can just keep using it. Just make it a new version with this Dirt Children's Storybook as the assignment. Showcase your story, describe the story, tell us what the moral is, what the lesson is, what the insight is about the book that we want to try to make sure we make part of your book. If there are versions of your book from the past, showcase some of those, or if there's similar books or book styles that you like. But this first three are just kind of meant to be like how has the book been illustrated in the past, or how have books like this been illustrated in the past. And then from there, you do get some research about how you want to do your version, looking at illustration styles that connect to what you're able to do. Or if you're ambitious, but also strategic and smart, ambitious style, illustration styles that you think you can learn and execute and deliver within the timeline of like 6 weeks that we have to do this. Be careful with this, but I'm all for learning and trying a new style, but just don't get in and over your head. Or tried and true, do what you do your thing. That's going to work too. But push yourself if you're doing your thing to do even better. Look at typography and color, and continue to build these visual inspiration research decks that will help guide you towards how you're going to make your book, and also let me know in class next what you're going to try to do. And the ending is going to be your design approach or your design concept, and just talk about how you're going to take on your story. If you're doing a new story, or even if you're adapting a story, you might want to even showcase the text and say, here's my story text and what I'm going to do. It could be next week too, if you want, but that can come into this as well. But give us a rundown of what you're going to do, And of course, continue to provide those beautiful, wonderful, inspiring thank you pages that you guys have been doing so well. And I'm so always so excited to see them because they're so awesome and being thankful at the end and being and giving praise at the beginning. That's the part we don't talk about. Give praise at the beginning, give thanks at the end. Okay, so this is just a recap of what you're going to be turning in for the assignment, your version of it. But the first step, of course, is to pick your story. So go through that list, read some of those stories. And some of them might be long and like creepy or scary, like, but don't let that, don't say that, don't write them off because of that, because you can adapt them. You can try to understand what the story is and say, okay, I'm going to make this a little bit different. I'm going to follow the idea of what the story is about, but I'm going to take out the part where the mother eats the children or whatever, whatever it is that you might not want to show. Again, but I'm not afraid of showing bad or talking about bad, scary things. We just have to do it right. So pick that story. Let me know what story you're interested in, so that we can avoid people having the same story and and finding out in class after you've done your assignment. But I'm going to put this up. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to put this up soon. The new children's storybook part one with links to some of the books we looked at and a summary of what you need to do for your research concept deck. All right, guys, that was a long one, but I appreciate you staying through the end. And now it's time to get back to work and begin this next project, which is going to be super awesome. You guys have just gone through the whole experience of creating a book with me over the course of 6 weeks or so. And you now are children's book designers, children's book authors for that matter. You have done this. They're not printed yet, but they're going to be soon. It's official. Like, you are now experienced at this. So take the experience you've gotten from these first weeks of this class. Take the experience you've gotten from this year at Parsons, from your years at Parsons, from your years as an artist, from your life, all the things you've done, bring them together now and synchronize them into what you're going to do with this book, because this is your opportunity now to do something great, something that can really touch people, that can inspire them, that can teach them. Take this seriously like you've been doing. I've appreciated how all of you have taken your project so seriously and how you followed my guidance. And I'm just really, really looking forward to what you're going to do next. So let's keep going. Let's make this thing happen. All right, guys, go forward. We'll see you Thursday in class. Bye.